Hi, okay, so this is Stu, and we're at beautiful Purple Valley with Michael Gannon. Welcome. And we're just going to ask him some random questions, really, I think, without any pre-planning on my part. But what I wanted to do, first of all, is ask you about maybe how your practice started, the physicality of it, because I've talked to a lot of teachers, and they sort of started from the lines of maybe practicing twice a day, 5-hour sessions, all this sort of really intense stuff. And I wonder whether you also came from that sort of background when you first started.
Well, when I first started, no, because I stumbled upon it by accident. I have no idea what it was. There's a story of that I could share first, and I guess we can talk about when I became like an Ashtanga freak and I was practicing.
Sure. Where were you coming
hours.
from? What was your...
Well, I was living in Miami Beach, on South Beach at the time, and I was still working in the advertising business. But I also had a little boutique, a clothing store with a girlfriend at the time who was a designer. And it just so happened on the same block in South Beach there was a yoga studio, this small kind of community yoga studio. And yoga people used to come into the boutique all sweaty and smelly, wanting to try on dresses. I'd say, why don't you come back next time on your way to yoga, before you go to yoga? And they had these big rolls of rubber with them and stuff, and I was curious, and then I started, meeting people and talking to them, and then I met some teachers, and then I met the owner, and she said, oh, you should come to class sometime. But it wasn't until one day when I was in the boutique, one of my party buddies was walking by the front of the boutique, and he had one of those pieces of rubber over his shoulder, hopping by, and I went and opened the door, and I said, Alfred, where are you going? He goes, I'm going to yoga. I'm like, yoga? You do yoga? And he says, yeah, there's lots of nice, cute girls there. And I said, okay, now I understand.
And then you went.
And then I went. But the first time I went, and I had no idea what to expect. He said, yeah, I'm going on this night, come with me. So I went in. I saw the girl that was the owner, and she said, Michael, you came. Here, fill out this form. And I'm like, what is this? A release waiver? Why do I need to sign a release form to practice yoga? Okay. She goes, take one of those funny mats and go in the room. The teacher will be here in a little while. So I went in, I rolled my mat out, and there was a half a dozen people already in there spread around the room. Some were just kind of sitting there, some were chatting, some were stretching their bodies already, some were just kind of laying on the floor. So I just sat there and waited. Slowly, the room started to fill up with about 25, 30 people. And this bald guy walks in with a funny necklace, and he starts saying some stuff, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just listening and watching, and then everybody stands up. So I stand up, and everybody puts their body in a certain position. So I was just, this started my monkey see, monkey do. And everybody put their arms up like this. So I put my arms up like this, and everybody folded forward. So I did the same. And this continued for about an hour and a half. Slipping and sliding and sweating and huffing and puffing.
And just copying.
Just copying, aching in my body. Oh my God, how did they do that? But the thing that's the most memorable to me of my first time ever practicing asana is when I laid down into final relaxation at the end of the class. There was like this charge, this energy racing through my body. And I was like, wow, what the hell is that? This is really cool. And every time I tell this story, it gives me goosebumps because it kind of takes me back to that same sensation. I was like, this is amazing. I want to try this again. Because it was such a rush for me. And so I just started going casually, a couple times a week when it was convenient.
And was it a particular style of yoga?
At that very first class, it was a power yoga class. And this particular school was multidisciplinary, so they had everything. And so when I started going more regularly, it was like whatever was on the schedule that was convenient for my schedule. So one day it was Bikram, another day it was power yoga, another day it was Iyengar, another day Shivananda, another day Ashtanga, another day their own sequence.
Oh, cool. So you're exposed to quite a mix right from the word go.
Lots of different things right from the beginning. But the Ashtanga caught my attention, so I would always be sure to go to the 2 Ashtanga classes they had on the schedule a week. And then I did this for a couple months casually, and I thought, okay, it's getting more interesting. There's something behind this yoga, so I'm going to do a test. I'm going to do this yoga thing every day for a month and see what happens. So I bought a proper membership, made a commitment to go at least once a day
to the same
for a
place.
month, to the same place.
Yeah.
And this was before they even had these like yoga challenges for 30 days or 40 days. This was way back, long time ago. And I just made a commitment to do that. And again, it was sometimes in the morning, some in the afternoon, sometimes in the evening. even on the weekends, sometimes I would go to class in the morning and in the afternoon because I had the time. And after doing it every day for a month, it just exploded the experience even more. And I was like already starting to feel very subtle, but the initial stages of transformation and change in my body. And then ideas, different, you know, thoughts and questions in my mind. And I thought, okay, I'm going to keep doing this. And that went on for about 6 months. And then that same bald guy that taught the very first class that I went to, Paul, who's become one of my dear friends over the years, he kicked me out of the nest. One day he came up to me, he said, Michael, you're an Ashtangi. Go get out of here. There's only Ashtanga 2 days a week here. It's limited. You know, there's nothing really more here for you. Go to the other side of the beach and practice with this guy, Wayne, who he's a student of Patabi Joyce. He's, you know, he's teaching and practicing only Ashtanga 6 days a week, and that's what you should be doing. And I was like, no,
Well, you were resistant to start
I
with,
like it here. I like my friends. I like these
Yeah.
teachers. I like the space. I like doing different stuff. So he literally kicked me out of the yoga nest, and I went over to the other side of the beach and checked it out, and it was immediately extremely different. It was much more serious, much more intense, much more of a challenging practice on a physical level, especially doing that same practice every day for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So then, of course, when I changed my experience of practicing every day something different to practicing every day the same thing, especially a system like Ashtanga, it just exploded for me even more again. And I stayed with this teacher and I apprenticed with him for 2 years, and then it just continued to destroy my life more and more as it continued.
Take up more and more of your time.
Yeah, yeah.
So from there, did you ever go back to look at other styles again, or were you hooked on Ashtanga and you stuck with that?
I was definitely hooked on Ashtanga. Not only for many years did I not go back and try other styles, I was like so brainwashed, it was like sacrilege to me at that point. You know, like anything that I would do, not only practice, but anything that I would do with my body, period, that was not supporting my Ashtanga practice was a no-no.
So that was like other forms of exercise, like running or...
All that stuff slowly went away. Things like
Yeah.
running or being in the gym or playing beach volleyball or inline skating, things that could be doing something to my body that was in conflict to what I thought I wanted to do with my body at the time for yoga.
And how's that mentality changed now? Has it changed?
Oh yeah, I mean, since then it's changed all the way to the other extreme. You know, I went down that rabbit hole so deep and so profound that, you know, I went through the phase of being a very judgmental Ashtangi and being 100% sure that there was no other yoga practice, not just for me. There was no other yoga practice, period, and everybody should be doing Ashtanga.
Was that as a teacher at that stage, or
no,
as a
even before as a teacher,
Yeah.
just as an individual. And you know, and I went through phases of that, and I would come in contact with great teachers of another style or something completely different that I missed out on because I was like this.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't realize it then, and it was not important to me then, which is fine, which is where I was. It was the trip that I was on. But in hindsight, I can look back and say, oh, what an ass I was. You know, what an arrogant little, you know, fuck that didn't know anything about, you know, yoga or life. But in hindsight, after so many years looking back at that, I can see how that path has served me as a teacher, because I was not unique, of course, in that experience.
Yeah.
Many people go through it. Most people go through it. So I recognize it in practitioners, and because I went through it, I have something to share about it.
And what would you say, you know, there's a lot of people, as you say, even now, going through exactly the same thing. They enjoy their running, say, but they don't want to run now because they feel it's going to increase the restriction for their yoga practice, and they don't want to stop their yoga practice, or they want their yoga practice to progress physically, shall we say.
Right.
What would your words of wisdom in hindsight now be to them?
Well, I always try to ask them the question why they think they need to do it, why they think they need to choose one first.
Yeah.
and see if it's a superficial reason, if it's just, if they're a yoga tourist, if it's something so new, they think, oh my God, I don't want to do this anymore, you know. And if they start asking me questions like, once you started getting into the yoga, did you still skate? Did you still run? Did you do these things? And I can tell them, well, actually, no, I didn't. But, you know, just because I did it doesn't mean that you should or shouldn't. So I ask them, what is the reason? But I kind of simplify it and let them do the work. I say, what I would invite you to do is evaluate the two. If you think of your yoga practice and what you're looking to experience in your body physically with the yoga practice versus the other practice, whether it's running or cycling or weightlifting or football or baseball or tennis, whatever it is, and in kind of evaluate which really is your practice. Is yoga your practice and you've gotten to the point now you're so passionate and you feel so sure that that's what you want to do now for a long, long time? Or is it just something that you started to do to support this other practice or this other sport? Or is this other sport, is this, for example, your livelihood? Are you a professional athlete? Do you know, if you stop doing this, are you not going to be able to feed your family? Okay, if that's the case, then don't stop doing that and just do yoga. And don't even think about supporting yourself as a yoga teacher, because that's really hard to do. But if your yoga practice is something that is supporting your other practice, accept that. And don't be trying to put your legs behind your head or do deep knee poses or crazy back bends. That is going to hinder your body in ways that make it more challenging to do your other practice. But if the other practice is something that you just like to do, it's casual, or, you know, it's one of the things you do, but you don't really get anything out of it, you know, for the long run, then maybe the yoga is something that you can put more energy in and stop doing that. So, and it's a question that makes people go, okay, let me think about that. And a lot of people that are solid in what's important to them can say, yeah, you're right. Running is my passion. I love running. I run this many marathons, or, you know, training in the gym, or this sport, you know, whatever it is. Yeah, I want to keep doing that. So yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I should stop pushing myself so much like this. And then they can do the practice, the asana practice, from a much slower, softer space. And clearly they're going to still open their body. They're still going to make progress in a physical way with their practice. And then, of course, get all the other parts, all the results that are much more important that they don't know in the early stages, and they'll start to learn earlier, you know, with their mind and with their heart and with their eyes and their awareness. But they can still be involved in their other practice as well.
And those other parts we're talking about, how long is it before you started realizing yourself that there's more to this than just a physical buzz from doing the practice?
Well, it was really quick, and it took a long time, depending on how we look at it. Because, you know, in those first months, you know, when I was experiencing everything new, it's like in those first months of your yoga, you know, dating is the most exciting. It's like any other relationship, you know, you have with a partner. Everything is fresh, exciting, new. You know, you look forward to seeing them. You prepare yourself. You make yourself look nice before you go out to see them. It's the same thing with the yoga practice in early stages. You get up early, you bathe, you make it like you're going to church, and you go in and you're like, you make sure you're early and you have your incense, your candle, or you get there to get the space that you want in the room and everything. And your practice becomes like a date. And then after many, many years, you can just roll out of bed and, you know, just go to the mat and do your practice because it's your practice. But in the early stages, you're thinking only about the physical, but you put so much passion and so much energy into it, and you start experiencing all these new things on the mats, in your mind, when the teacher says something during class, when the teacher says something after class, or when you meet somebody and they say something too about the practice experience for them, somebody that's been doing it longer. Everything is new. And then really quickly you start to realize, wow, it's more than just what I'm doing on the mat. They have these other gatherings, or people go out to eat together, or they hang out together, or there's full moon drum circles. You know, you start learning about all of this really crazy yogi hippie stuff that's going on that maybe wasn't part of your lifestyle, and it starts to affect your mind. But it takes a couple years of being in the practice, in my experience, to really appreciate how it moves beyond the physical. And And for me, it really was first the physical, first the crude body, first all the purification, the detoxing, the opening of the body, and really being most concerned about what's happening with my body when I do the practice. And of course, the identification with that practice of wanting to know, when am I going to be able to do this pose, or when am I going to get this leg here, or when's this knee going to be able to move like that, and
Yep.
when is the back bend going to be like this, and when is my teacher going to let me do this pose. But after kind of transcending all that and getting some results and getting happy from achieving those things, you start to kind of experience other things from observing yourself, and what you do and what you don't do, what you like, what you don't like, and starting to kind of see what other people do. And the mind starts to get very much involved. And then, you know, even if you don't start doing swadhyaya, studying things, you know, like the scriptures or reading books or going to lectures, you know, about yoga or philosophy, just your own experience starts to engage the mind, because once the body becomes awakened, the mind kind of like says, whoa, what's going on? Something's different. Stuff is moving differently. The breath is moving differently. The body's changing. Sleep patterns are different. Now the mind is starting to think about diet and what you do with your energy when you're not practicing. So it becomes a big head trip, and you move out of the body and you move into your head, which is also, at least in my experience, it's part of the process. And then you spend lots of time in your head and start to become judgmental of the body part, and you think, yeah, I don't need to do so much asana. I don't need to work so hard. I don't care if I can get my legs behind my head. You know, this is better for me right now. What I'm reading and what people are teaching me and what I'm experiencing with people. But then the combination of the body and the mind starts to then waken things on a higher level still, which kind of becomes the energetic body or the emotional body. Not everybody kind of gets to that point with their practice, but if you stay consistent with the practice, especially a demanding practice like Ashtanga, I think it's inevitable. And that's, I think, when people start to really experience transformation kind of in a circular basis. It's like goes from focus on body to awareness in the mind to more subtle things energetically in the bandhas, in the chakras, and emotional stuff, and then back to body, and it just keeps circling. And then they start to be combined, and you experience all three, sometimes when you're practicing, sometimes when you're not practicing, sometimes when you're making love, sometimes when you're speaking to people, and it just kind of makes this awakened state in everything that you do. But there's no way to know that when you walk into a yoga class.
The very first time.
The trouble that you're potentially getting yourself into is it's always a surprise.
And how's your practice? So you started with this sort of a mixture, then you went to this very sort of rigid, just Ashtanga.
Mm-hmm.
And how is it changing now? What is the way that you're taking your practice? Are you still strict Ashtanga, or are you taking a little bit of variation to it?
Well, yeah, if I look at where I am now, I mean, we jump way forward from what we were talking about, but I'm almost back where I started,
right,
with some wisdom. Where when I started, I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And if I had wisdom, I could have started and stayed right there.
Yeah.
When I say right there, in that space of being open to many systems, many teachers, many ideas, it's all the same. And maybe I like this one more, maybe I don't. And maybe I would have dedicated myself to one, maybe not, but it wouldn't have mattered. Back then, it really mattered. And I was, you know, I chose one path, one guru, one system, one way. Now, I don't really care.
Right.
Now I've gotten to a space, I guess it's like freedom for me in what I choose to do or not to do on a daily basis. Yoga obviously is a very important part of my life, but it's not who I am.
Yeah.
You know, I'm yoga teacher, I'm yoga practitioner, but I'm also father, brother, son, traveler, lover, so many things that I allow myself to just be at whatever moment without having to be an Ashtangi, or without having to be teacher, or without having to be advanced practitioner, or any of those things. And I think that comes from going through all those different stages and realizing it's like they're all like different hats. I can put them on and change from father to teacher to practitioner to entrepreneur. But the time that's most interesting is between one hat coming off and the other hat coming on.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a way of like being able to stay in that space of, you know, you might say the true self or who I really am without having to have a title, without having to wear a hat. But it's a really hard thing, I think, for us to do because we want to identify with something.
Yeah.
You know, like who are you? What are you? You know, and nobody wants to be a nobody. You know.
So what happens when you get up in the morning? Is it always there's going to be some sort of asana or pranayama practice, regardless, or do you get up some days and just think, oh, I'm going to go to the beach, go surfing, or whatever?
It's definitely a practice every morning when I wake up. For example, this point in my life, the first practice that I usually do when I wake up is change a diaper.
Right.
Make
in handstand?
Yeah, make a bottle of, you know, almond milk or rice milk or something for the baby. You know, make sure another child hasn't peed the bed and take them pee before they do. And depending on which one of those practice happens determines what's next. You know, then maybe I'm off to the yoga school, you know, to yoga because I have to teach, or take the kids to school, or, you know, as householder is another one of my hats.
Yeah.
That I allow that to be my first practice. And then practices for me, whether it's asana, pranayama, meditation, reading, writing, comes after I take care of everybody else.
Yeah.
Which sucks, okay? I mean, it's a beautiful thing to be able to do as a service, you know, to be there for my family. But from a selfish standpoint, it sucks. This is one of my biggest practices right now, Stu, because it ain't changing anytime soon because I have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old and a 9-year-old. And my 4th child is a brand new yoga school that opened 4 months ago. So, full on, yeah. And I'm okay with that, but I'm also okay with saying, it's fucking overwhelming.
Yeah.
You know, how am I going to survive this? I don't know. Let's get through today and then we'll see what happens tomorrow. But, you know, I'm blessed still. Like right now I'm here at Purple Valley in Goa.
Yeah.
My 2 boys are in Africa with their grandmother, you know, and my daughter is in Mexico City with her mother, and my wife is here with me now, and it's just me teaching, sharing, practicing, spending time with my wife, talking to you, and having the Indian experience, and remembering what my life was like before, and appreciating so much the freedom, the different space that I was in, but obviously still loving and being grateful for my householder life and everything,
and the
you
qualities
know,
that brings
and being grateful for all the staff that are back home running the school, you know, while we're away, and the people taking care of our children. It's like a daily appreciation meditation that I'm in right here now. So I'm able to experience this trip here in India now, and for the past several years, in a different way that I did for many, many years that I came here before I was householder.
Yeah.
Because it was completely selfish. I did whatever I wanted to do or didn't do what I wanted to do. I would come to India with an intention to stay this long, and if I decided to stay longer, I'd stay longer. If I decided to leave earlier, if I wanted to go somebody else, if I wanted to go teach or want to go practice, I did whatever I wanted. And this realization now in hindsight makes me appreciate how things were before and appreciate how they are now, but it makes me a good mirror for people that are in both those places. Some
because it's real.
It's real, yeah.
Yeah, people coming through the door in the same situation.
Yeah, I like to kind of shock people a little bit that don't realize what I didn't realize when I was in that freedom space.
Yeah.
And I hear people say all the time, what I used to say all the time is like, I just don't have the time. Oh my God, I've got so much going on. You know, I've got to work, and I'm going on this trip, and I've got to take care of my house, and maybe I have a dog, and it's just I'm tired, and I have to do my practice. I have to do my other practice. Yeah, I just wish I wish there were more hours in the day.
Yeah.
So when somebody says that, I ask them, how many children do you have? Oh no, I don't have any children. Are you married? No, I'm actually single. You have no idea how much time you have. You have unlimited time. You are the master of your own destiny.
Universe.
You can do whatever you want. You know, you can be completely selfish. You can do all those things that you're saying that you don't have time to do, or you can blow them off, okay? You don't have to do any of this, okay? And a lot of people say, oh, I chose not to have children, or I'm choosing to be single. And so that's, you know, you have children because you chose. Like, it doesn't have anything to do with that. I'm just letting you know, you know, I'm kind of letting you see it, and you can just be aware of it, you know, for your own sake. Maybe it's a wake-up call to you, like, oh, wow, that's interesting. Because, yes, I do want to have kids someday, you know, but I don't right now, so I better make sure that I appreciate all the time in the world that I have right now, because when I get to be like that in that householder situation, most people don't get it. The reason I know most people won't get it is I had people say things like that to me, and I didn't get it. And I was like, yeah, but that's way in the future. By that time, I'm going to be so enlightened and so strong, and I'm going to have so much money, and I'm going to be, you know, it'll be easy to have kids and a partner. And no matter what you have, it's not easy. For me, it's one of the most advanced practices. So coming kind of back full circle to your question, you know, my yoga practice is whatever each day and whenever each day that's appropriate for my life.
So what does that mean? So the mat goes down, okay? We've got you, you've done the diapers, we've got you in the Charlotte, you've got some time on the mat. So what do you do? Do you do a Ashtanga practice per se, or? Sometimes
I'll just do Ashtanga practice. And most times that's what I'll do, or at least that's how I'll start. Because that's my foundation. That's what I've done more than anything, thousands of times. And I put down my mat, said Om Vande Guru Nam, and did everything that comes after that. That for me is the easiest, truest, most authentic, most whole practice that I can do, and based on my experience, for anybody. And I don't have to think. I can just breathe and move. I drop down out of my head and everything that's going on with family, with business, with travel, with media, and for that time I can do my practice. And when I say time, it can be any amount of time. It can be 2 hours, it can be an hour, it can be 15 minutes. I can breathe myself into bliss in 15 minutes. I can actually practice all of primary series in 15 minutes if I want to. It's a very unique.
Is there a book coming out soon?
Primary
series in 15 minutes.
There is, but that might be, maybe that's a good name for a second book. There is a book coming, but no, that's not it. No, but it's a different practice, of course. But you know, I've learned how to get all the juice that I need in much less time than I was conditioned of what I needed to do, how long it take, which poses I needed to do, and which way, you know, initially. So it kind of it takes a different approach on the tradition. It's still from the tradition, but in a, you know, in a different way. But sometimes I don't do Ashtanga.
What happens then?
What I usually do, the first thing I push play on my iPad from one of my Spotify playlists, or one of my classic rock playlist, or kind of an R&B hip hop playlist, or maybe kind of a mix of rock and mantra, different playlists that I use that kind of inspire me and charge me, you know, in a different way, because music is something I'm very passionate about. Yeah. And when I put on music, the practice becomes much more fluid, much more creative, much more free than when I'm just going through the Ashtanga sequence.
Some people worry about how you connect with the breath when you've got music, because I know it's an internal hearing of the breath, but also I know when I've been in a class with music, I start humming along to the music, or bobbing or moving if it's good music, and I lose that connection. Banda's breath, all that business. Does it matter then? You know.
Well, I can give you a short answer, or I give you a more detailed answer.
Let's have some detail.
Okay, well, let me give you the short answer first. It's a little more kind of controversial and interesting. I would say to somebody that is in that space that they are stuck.
Yeah.
Okay, that it's ridiculous, it's bullshit, then that's something that they should work on. They should spend more time practicing with music and get over this issue that they have with their breath. But I can also sympathize, I can relate to that, because I went through the same process when I was in that kind of narrow-minded space myself, and I would tell people, no, no, don't practice with music, because you know the music is the sound of your breath, and the music gets your mind going and going through fantasies and stories and remembering. You hear a melancholic song, you remember when you were in high school or college, or this girlfriend or this boyfriend or this relationship, you know, things, and you're very much in your head. And because for me the idea of practice is get out of head and into my breath and drop down into the body. So, you know, I was really good at convincing people not to practice with music.
Yeah.
If you have to use music, only use it in final relaxation. Put on some shanti music so that you can, you know, drift
Yeah.
off and into fantasy land, and, you know, and have a nice kind of yoga nidra. But that's one of the things that changed for me when I kind of felt myself being more free. And I think, at least for me, and when I teach this way to people, there's something more that you can have in your practice by allowing that experience to happen. Just like you said in your case, you start thinking and humming along with the music, and it becomes like a dance. Okay, you know, this practice of yoga, you know, we like to say that, well, if your yoga practice is not fun, you know, then why do you do it? Yeah, if you do a very serious kind of focused tapas practice like Ashtanga with just your breath and everything and going deep, it can be fun, but can it really?
There's a certain seriousness
exactly.
to it, isn't there? Yeah.
It's way serious. It can be way serious. And when it's done, you feel like, wow, I feel great, this is great. But why not feel fun and great while you're doing it? Now, not every practitioner can probably pull this off. I would probably say, if we were to make it, to be fair, somebody that already is grounded in a deep practice, Ashtanga or some other type of practice, and if they have a passion for music, they can play the music and move through the practice with the music, and even kind of choreograph their movements and their breaths and how they move with the rhythm of the music, with the beat, for example, and still get all the benefits of the practice, but have some excitement and some bliss happening while you're doing it. That's what happens for me. And then even more importantly, what happens for me, those days when I say, no, I don't want to practice, I'm tired, I feel like crap, I'm really distracted, I'd rather be doing this or doing that, I just say, okay, I'm just going to put on the music, do some sun salutations, just to move and breathe a little bit, and then I'll go do whatever I want to do. And it sucks me in every time, because the music, it's just like, it's like being in the car, arriving to your destination, but you don't get out of the car because that song that you're enjoying is still playing, so you stay there, okay? Or you drive around the block again, you know, because you like this song.
Yeah.
So if it's a playlist that you've created, obviously, which are songs that mean something to you, that you feel, that inspire you, then it just becomes this driver for your practice. And that's something that revives my practice very often.
It definitely gives some more fluidity to the movement, doesn't it? To have some sound, some other music. What do you do with your breath personally? If the music is on, do you just not necessarily worry about synchronizing it, or does it stay synchronized because of the length you practice?
It's a very good question. Because I've spent so many years practicing Vinyasa with the original Vinyasa system in Ashtanga, it's second nature for me. Anytime I'm moving, the breath is leading the movement. Whatever it is, whichever movement I'm making, it's impossible for me to move without my breath leading the way. So the music's there. It doesn't matter if I'm still going at the slow pace of my breath and the music's at a different beat, or if I'm moving with the music.
Yeah.
My breath, you know, the rhythm of my breath will change maybe with the music, and then my body, but I'm always having my body follow the breath. I always try to never let my breath follow the body. So it becomes like a true yogic choreography.
Yeah.
So if you were to watch me practice with music, okay, you would see one thing, but if you were to cut out the music track and have my breath track, you would hear my breath moving in a rhythmic way, and then you think it's almost like his breath is singing, you know, with some kind of rhythm, and then the music comes in and you kind of make the connection to those two. So that to me, I don't know, maybe that's a higher level of practice, you know, when you've gone through the foundation of learning how to breathe and move without the music, and it becomes second nature. It's just like any other art for me. Like if you're a musician, you learn how to play scales or play scales or play scales or sing scales. You know, if you're an artist, you learn the foundations of painting, the backgrounds. If you're a dancer, you learn first position, second position, you know, and you repeat these things over and over again. If you're a martial artist, you learn, you know, paint, fence, wax on, wax off, you know, these repetition. You know, I like to say, from what I've learned, is repetition is a mother of perfection. So these things become second nature, and then you become more of a creative expressionist in your art, whether it's music, dance, painting, yoga.
And do you, in that expression, is your body, are you listening to what your body maybe needs? So those days when maybe we'll call it free flow, what is guiding that flow? Is it, I really feel that I need some space in my waist, or that today this area is tight? Are you going down those lines, or how are you flowing?
Well, unless there's really something going on in my body, if I feel like, oh, my back from this yesterday, or my hamstrings from that yesterday, or my shoulders from something, then maybe I'll do that. But I don't, because I come from being an Ashtangi, you know that's not how we roll. You know, we know that the practice is complete with everything, whether you're practicing primary or intermediate or advanced. You do the sequence, and it takes care of all those parts of your body. Maybe you need to spend a little more breath, a little more time, a little more intentions, or repeat a couple times a particular pose that gets into an area that you feel you need to work on. But it doesn't mean that I'm just gonna do shoulders today, or I'm just gonna do hips today, or I'm just gonna, because it leaves out all the other parts of the body, which, even though they might not be the ones asking for attention, the other parts of the body want attention too. So in reality, it's the music that kind of drives me where I'm going. If it's very upbeat and it kind of makes me, you know, moving a lot, or if it's something that's more of a slow beat that I stay in, you know, lower postures for a long period of time, or it changes as the music changes. Yeah, it just becomes like a yogic choreography along with the music, and I don't plan. I just breathe and move. And go with the flow.
And if we take that beat back to Ashtanga and say this whole business of breath leading movement and the breath setting the tempo, shall we say, what do you do when it comes to postures that take a little bit longer to get into, but you don't want to change the tempo of the breath?
You just do. I mean, I surrender. It's very easy to surrender to the tempo of the breath if it's necessary. You know, if we look at, even from like a balanced breathing standpoint, where you ultimately want the breath to be balanced, all the inhales and all the exhales, there's going to be examples in the vinyasa sequence where you need a little more time to get into a pose. And if you're a master of really lengthening and elongating the breath, because your practice is focusing on that, then you can make all these elaborate movements on an inhale to be into the ready position.
You can last, make it, drag it out, make it last.
Where somebody that doesn't have that mastery of the breath, or their body open, they have to spend time moving, you know, and fidgeting and getting the body to move. But, you know, when you become an experienced practitioner, that's not necessary. So you can move your ass and lengthen the breath at the same time to stay with that rhythm of the breath.
But is that not then the movement dictating the breath rather than the breath dictating the movement?
No, because the breath will stay long and the body just moves quicker. If there's more, like if I'm going to jump through and come into the ready position for Janu Shirshasana A, okay, obviously the body can move much quicker.
Yeah. And if I'm dragging my breath out, then I've changed my breath.
But ultimately, you won't have to, because the same amount of time that I take to move to get into this position or Janu Shirshasana, if the body is supple, I can do the same thing, moving a little quicker, still smooth and fluidly, in that same breath. But if it's something that's more elaborate, like getting into Supta Karmasana, which is going to take more time, then you just lengthen the breath. And in those examples, it's fine. It's not something that I feel you need to get hung up on, if like, oh, you're taking more time with your breath. Even to the extent which I share with people, if you need to take extra breaths to get into that ready position, whatever the pose, it's fine. Because what I find is people that are not focusing on the awareness of the breath, lengthening their breath when they're moving through a vinyasa system, they might take 8 breaths unconsciously to get into the ready position for a Marichasana B.
Yeah, because they shorten it.
Exactly. But if they're trying to do it in one breath, even if it's impossible, they can maybe do it in 2 or 3, which is progress. Moving from 8 to 2 or 3 is a miracle. And then over some time, they'll start to be able to open the body more, lengthen the breath more, where they'll be able to get into that position all in an inhale. So it's not something that, you know, I think people need to expect they need to be able to do right away or they're failing. Just the intention, the understanding of what they're working towards will help them clean up the practice, will help them move smoother and more fluidly, and will ultimately make the practice more of a yoga experience. You know, they won't be so much in their head, they won't be so distracted with what's going on with their body. They'll be focused on the breath, and the body will start to relax more, the blood will flow better, the body becomes more loosey-goosey, and it just naturally becomes easier to move in and out of the poses.
And going back to the music side of things, we're on the mat, we're doing our asana. That changes your mood as well, depending on the type of music you're playing, and influence the type of asanas you do, or?
Well, only in general. Like if there's something that's kind of more chill and more downbeat, maybe I'll spend more time in a pose, or I'll spend more time on the ground. Where if I'm doing something that's more upbeat, I'll spend more time in standing poses and be more inspired to be floating and flying around, lots of arm balances and things like this. But sometimes it's both. Sometimes it's up and down. You know, it's really a license for me to do whatever the hell I want, because I'm no longer following any system or any rules. There's no rules. So if I go up and then back down to the floor and back up again, and doing arm balances and then doing back bends and then doing seated stuff and laying down and just feeling the music and then rolling back into chakrasana and coming up again, I mean, it really becomes like a game.
Do you find that there's certain asanas that always seem to find their way into whatever it is you're doing? I mean, you're avoiding the word favorite, but, you know, we have certain inclinations towards certain stuff.
For me, you know, I'm guilty like most of us as Ashtangis are. I like to be flying, you know, I like to be on my hands, all kinds of arm balances. So, yeah. And
what are the qualities, do you think, for people that are still maybe at the beginnings of their practice and maybe just beginning to explore arm balances? What is it about arm balances that have that attractive appeal, the qualities that they give?
That's a very good question. I think the biggest thing that draws everybody to wanting to do handstands is it's one of the most playful things in the yoga practice. Not only in the Ashtanga practice, but any yoga practice, you know. And I think it's because it makes us feel like a kid again. Yeah. You know, I can remember when I was young, you know, doing cartwheels and backflips, you know, and there was no preparation, there was no rules, there was no breath, there was no bandhas. It's just like, let's be a kamikaze and throw our bodies upside down, you know. It's like we were made out of rubber, we'd never get hurt. So, you know, in the grass or in the snow or in the gymnasium, just, you know, throwing yourself upside down and crashing down and thinking, wow, that was fun, let's try it again. So even though, you know, when we're pushing 50, maybe it's not so easy and we're not so supple and we're not so fearless.
The falls are a little bit more painful.
Exactly, yeah. Pain has become a teacher for us for many decades. It makes us remember what that's like. So even though we have to be a little more cautious and maybe learn some technique and understand the breath and use the bandhas and use the wall, we start to remember that, think, wow, I'm feeling young. It's kind of like, I think it's one of the places where we can really consider asana practice a way of reversing the aging process. Yeah. Because, you know, as you say, you're only as old as you feel. Yeah, you're only as old as you feel. So if doing handstands makes you feel young, then for that moment that you're doing handstands, you feel young. Now maybe the next day when you're sore, you might feel old, but it was nice to feel young. But that's one of the amazing things about a disciplined practice, whether it's Ashtanga or something else. If you're developing the techniques, if you're developing the foundation, if you're developing an understanding of working with your bandhas and working with your breath control, and then understanding the connection, the alchemy of breath and bandhas together that kind of creates that flying, that floaty, that light energy, so that you can be more capable of doing flying poses, then it's possible. There's many things that my body can do now, after practicing yoga for almost 20 years, that 20 years ago I couldn't do with my body.
Yeah.
because I didn't have that flexibility, I didn't have that balance, I didn't have that awareness with my breath. I didn't even know what anything like bandhas was. The only thing that core, closest thing to it, core to me, was like, yeah, I do some crunches to develop my core, but the yoga experience just changed your mind-body potential to do things. So things that are just fun, or things that maybe you used to do that you couldn't do as well, like climbing or swimming or dancing or play fighting. I mean, just so many things that I would have never done with my body 20 years ago. And it comes in handy with when you have small children. When you're playing with yeah, when you're playing with your small children, you're like, okay, I can move, in these certain ways, and I hope I can continue for the next 20 years to move like this, for my children, especially if you wait till you're, almost 50 to have another child. Then, you've got to like think, shit, how old am I going to be when this kid's like wanting to play, play with me, football or baseball in the backyard or something like that, or at the beach. So fortunately for this body, it looks like it's still going to be able to roll with the kids, in those times. But, I'm grateful because I look at other people, peers, that I look at them and I think they're 20 years older than me, and they might be 5 years younger than me. Yeah. And I think, wow, okay.
It does keep a certain amount of vibrancy and youth to the body, the physical practice does. Definitely, and the other aspects are cool.
The body and the mind. The body and the mind. Because for me, one of the biggest shocks to me, when I'm always reminded when people ask me how old I am, and they're like, oh my God, I thought you were this age, or I thought you were that age, and I thought
75, 80, that sort of thing.
Exactly, yeah. And when I'm with people that I'm identifying, we're talking and sharing and learning, whether it's on retreats or people that I meet in restaurants or through friends or whatever, and I'm identifying with them, we're like sharing and feeling at the same age, and then age comes up and it turns out that I'm 20 years older than them. It's like, oh my God, that's right. Yeah, they're in a much different space than I am, even though I feel like I'm in that space. Yeah. So, I'm grateful for that, and I think yoga has a lot to do with that.
Has kept you there.
Yeah.
And if I can rewind you back, we got you onto handstands for a while. Is that something you do for workshops and stuff like that?
Yeah, of course I have to, because people
want to play.
Any wise yoga teacher is going to try to give the people what they want, right?
So what are the things that enlighten people most about handstands, make the difference for them when they're struggling with them?
Well, I teach a workshop called The Magic of Bandhas, and I teach a series of maybe 6 or 7 different techniques in different parts of the body, helping people with repetition, with some little exercises, showing them by repeating these little exercises with repetition that they can lengthen their arms, they can shorten their torso, they can really activate their core, they can really tuck the legs in. These are with all different individual exercises, which are things that create the physical possibility of the body to be able to do this thing that everybody wants to do in Ashtanga practice, is jump back or jump through.
So it's not, I've got short arms.
Yeah, I use this as a joke when I teach, saying, who thinks they have the arms that are too short? Everybody raises their hands. And I explain, I said, well, when you say too short, like your arms are too short relative to what? And then think about it, it's like, well, and they realize it's the torso. And it's like, okay, so your arms are too short relative to your torso. We all have these long, beautiful, regal torsos. We want to be long and tall, but we have these short, stubby arms. They don't work really well to do the jump back thing. If we all had long arms like an orangutan, when you walk, your arms dragged on the floor, then it'd be really easy to pick yourself up and create the space that you need all the time.
Binding too. So.
Exactly, for binding. So, we do some exercises that help them tune into other parts of the body that they don't think of. Because it's easy to say, my arms are too short, my ass is too big, my legs are too big, my feet are too big, I need some blocks. If you give me some blocks, I can do it, no problem. My other teacher said I could use blocks. Or some teacher told me, oh, it's impossible for you because you're too fat, So, when we share different techniques that can help people really get into these parts of the body and understand the position of hands and how the breath needs to be moving and the combination of all these things, people start to, oh my God, I can feel it happening. I mean, I can't do it yet. It's going to take much practice, but now I understand.
There's a light.
There's a light, yeah.
So how do they shorten their torso?
Oh, they just have to understand that it's okay for them to scrunch themselves really small, like they were in the fetal position. because for some people in their mind, like, no, I got to be lengthening my spine and all the yoga and everything I do. But you know, in some cases, that compression can help us in poses in lots of other ways. You know, so people, you know, it's hard sometimes for people to find these little techniques within the sequence, within a particular pose. But if things are kind of pulled apart and looked at as individual pieces and then done over and over and over to where they can really feel like, oh my God, my core, or oh my God, my shoulders, or depending on what the technique we're doing is, then that waking up of those parts of the body can be used in a different way.
And then they can put it all together.
And then they start to find the magic.
And so what's the magic in the handstands?
Well,
do you believe in kicking up with one leg or hopping? Or
I believe in getting up however you need to get up.
Okay.
If it's kicking with one leg or hopping up or going against the wall, because what it comes down to, first of all, for people is the mind. You know, those of us that are not children anymore, the mind is saying, what are you, crazy? We're not going to go upside down. All the blood's going to rush to the head. The feet are going to get cold. We could fall. We can hurt ourselves. You know, we don't understand what we're supposed to do. When we get upside down, everything's confused. So, you know, people get freaked out when they go upside down. Even if you've got them secure against the wall and they're in that position, oh my God, I'm upside down. You know,
wall
and then,
might move or something
yeah,
like
exactly.
that. Yeah.
All kinds of crazy things can happen. So, in my experience, the most important thing initially is just getting upside down, however it needs to happen, and just being there. So the wall is the best place to do that, because once you get up and you're on the wall, you can stay there for more than a split second. Because most people, when they're working, they're standing in the middle of the floor trying to get up, you know, however, whether they're jumping or kicking, and they're doing it for 5 minutes, they're like, I got up there almost for a half a second. Okay, it's coming. And they're exhausted and they've accomplished nothing.
Yeah.
But if they go to the wall, they surrender to the idea that I can't use the wall because I'm going to get stuck on the wall, I'm going to get attached to the wall, or it's not really a handstand. Just get up, do the wall, and be there and hold it for as long as you can. So first of all, the most important thing, you're getting the benefits from the arm balance in the wrists, in the shoulders, in the core, building strength, getting the blood flowing down, and the body getting used to it, and the mind saying, okay, it's not so bad, nothing is happening. And you can stay up there for 10 seconds and come down and say, I'm a little bit tired, and I just did a 10-second handstand, instead of being in the middle of the room for 5 minutes and having accomplished a 1-second handstand.
Yeah.
And then you start to develop the strength and the control and the awareness, and then teacher can say, okay, so now while you're here, very safely against the wall, do this with your hands, do this with your wrists, do this with your shoulders, do this with your core, put your head like this, breathe like this, squeeze your legs together, point your toes, try to reach as high as you can. All these little things that are gonna make a difference suddenly can be done, until you're like, okay, I can't do it anymore, I have to come down. And then you come down, you breathe, and then you come up and do it again.
So you're creating patterns of activation and
very simple. And more importantly, it's like, for me, it's like one of the mantras of the Ashtanga practice in general. You're giving somebody a practice. I can teach somebody that in 5 minutes and say, got it, do it again, got it, do it again, after a couple times. Okay, you do this by yourself every day, as much as you want to. You can do it in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, okay? And they will develop the strength, the confidence, the ability, and it'll start to come. And then every time I do see them and practice with them, you know, I bring them away from the wall, and then I can work with them without the wall, and they can start to feel it, you know, with a live wall, with me being there and not there, supporting them, helping them, and then they're on their way to being able to do it on their own.
So what do you feel needs to happen? Okay, we've got them away from the wall, they can hop up into a handstand in the middle of the room, they can balance, but then there seems to be this massive transition between being able to hop up or be able to take your feet, just lift them off the floor and rise them up. What dynamics has to change?
Well, I think the first thing to accept is it's not necessary to be able to float yourself up like a Cirque du Soleil artist, okay? If you get to that point and can do that, it's fantastic. It's beautiful, it feels great, it looks great, and it's a really strong demonstration of strength, breath, bandha combination, and control. Especially if you can do the same thing coming down with that same control and stop halfway and pike and whatever, up and down. But, you know, few people get to that level with their practice. By the time you get to that level, you know, you've moved so far beyond all those details and technique, it's not important. I think what's more important is people learning that the handstand ultimately comes from control from your core. It's an extension of what I talked about when I was explaining magic of bandhas, when we're helping people learn how to get their ass off the ground using their breath and their bandhas just to get this much off so they can shoot back into an exhale in a chaturanga. But then from doing that many thousands of times for many years, you learn how to maintain that lifting energy and lengthen the breath even more to take it all the way up to a handstand. So this is an advanced practice, but it comes from the core and the combination of the breath and the bandhas. So if you have that awareness and you're coming up into a handstand in the middle of the floor, whether you press up with both feet together or you kick up with one leg or you bunny hop up, what's important is that it's being done with control as opposed to just throwing yourself up like 1, 2, 3, throwing yourself up, holding your breath, or you know, and then you're doing one of these. It's like there's no control. It's purely like just lucky balance, and you might get there for a second, 1, 2, 3, 4, oh, and then you're down again. But if you can maintain, you know, control, if it's just the same thing we do when we stand up, but inverted, you know, we're not wobbling while we're walking. You know, we know how to do it because we've done it many times. The inversion of that is the exact same thing. It's just a lot harder because we haven't been, you know, learned that. We haven't been brought up that way.
And I've heard some people say you should come up on an exhale, and then some people up on an inhale. Do you think?
Well,
do you have a preference?
I'm in the inhale camp.
Yeah, I think I'm in that camp.
Yeah, my understanding of the Vinyasa system with Ashtanga is almost always, and there's exceptions like anything, almost always when we do an inhale, there's an upward movement. And when we do an exhale, it's a downward movement. So inhale, head up, exhale back down into chaturanga. Inhale, up dog, exhale, down dog. So the upward movement with inhale in Uddiyana Bandha, for me, creates a helium effect. So that, to me, is like where that light upward lifting feeling comes. For me, it seems very obvious. Anytime I'm exhaling, my energy is going down. So if I wanted to pick myself up and I did this, exhale, you know, I'm going down. Or even worse, if I do this, if I hold the breath, nothing's moving. But if I do this inhale movement, then that Uddiyana Bandha with the controlled inhale makes me light so I can float. So I would always say on a handstand, inhale up. And when you're coming down, it's like a compressor, like,
so it's the same on the other way.
You know, exhaling down. And the longer you can inhale, the longer you can keep lifting. If you have a short inhale, then there's no more lift. But if you can lengthen the inhale nice and slow, you can keep lifting yourself up.
And sometimes people, they do have, even with the jump through, they have problems with that, keeping the flow of the breath. So we're in down dog, we're going to jump through so a seated posture. A lot of people have a trouble with keeping that breath flowing all the way through. They've got that initial inhale, haven't they? Then it seems to stop for a while. Then it carries on again as they're coming through. What are anything?
It's just the mind.
Yeah.
It's just the mind. Like, it happens in many places in our yoga practice. It happens in many places in our life. You know, anytime there's something that takes force, you know, a lot of times we want to pick something already, you know, holding the breath, or stopping the breath, or something startles us, like, you know, we stop the breath. And the same thing happens in the practice. So, you know, when we do intense poses like Kapotasana, like, you know, something like this, or putting the leg behind the head, this expression of holding the breath. So when you're jumping, you might start, and then when you get to that apex of the need of strength, everything wants to lock up and stop the breath. But if you're aware of that, if you can see that it's happening, then you're already on your way to overcome it, because you just have to see, oh my God, I get to that point and my breath freezes. So just, again, it comes back to the idea of letting the breath lead the way and the body follow. So I'm going to do a nice smooth inhale on this movement. Whatever my body does, if my body collapses, if I touch the floor, I don't touch the floor, my breath is still going to keep moving. And it's just a process of reprogramming the mind, reconditioning the mind.
Because a lot of people are completely unaware that they hold their breath, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They don't realize it until when you're teaching them, you say, breathe, and they go, oh, if I was able to just breathe like that when he told me to breathe, I must not have been breathing.
In the first place.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of beginners now coming to the yoga practice. How do you deal with them as far as, do you modify stuff? Do you change the sequence for them? How do we deal with things now?
I don't feel any need to change the sequence. Actually, for me, the people that's most important for the sequence to be pure and traditional is beginners.
Yeah.
Because when I'm teaching beginners, I want them to get out of their head and into the breath as soon as possible. So the best way for me to teach them that is in the traditional way with the sequence. And the only thing that I've developed, the way that I feel most effective in teaching beginners, and I love teaching beginners, and I've taught many, many beginners, and I have no problem teaching beginners, is I've kind of created this puzzle system where I break up the sequence into little sections, which is easy for the mind to absorb.
Right.
So much sooner, in a couple of days of practicing, they understand a section of the practice where they can have their own self-practice.
Yeah.
And then they continue slowly from there, instead of for many, many months knowing that, oh my God, this is long sequence, I'm learning one at a time, or I'm following along, I'm remembering the best I can, or I'm copying somebody else, or that I kind of take away any crutches and make them really have to be in their head and learn it piece by piece, section by section.
And you have a book, I think, that's written, but published soon, we hope, maybe, that is aimed at beginners?
Yeah, there is a book that...
So what's it going to be called?
It's called Ashtanga Made Simple, Real Yoga for Real Beginners.
Okay.
And it uses this Gannon Mysore puzzle system that breaks it down in a way that makes it more palatable for beginners. And it can be beginners, people that do other yoga and come to Ashtanga, or people that have never done yoga before, but it simplifies the system that anybody really can do it. Because Pattabhi Jois, one of the things that I learned from him, from being with him for years, especially in the beginning, in his home shala, where there was room for about 8 of us to practice comfortably. But every morning at 4:30, we'd squeeze 12 of us in there. And there's people there practicing for 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, some people for 10 minutes, but all together side by side. And every year that I practiced with him, at least once a month, I would have a similar experience. I'd be on the mat doing my practice. It didn't matter what I was practicing that day, primary, intermediate, advanced. I would feel somebody roll out their mat in the space next to me with this kind of feeling like what the hell am I doing here? Why am I here? And they look around and they feel this breath and this sweat and people doing all this crazy stuff. And then they finally get smart and they think, yeah, I'm out of here. They bend down to roll up their mat, but then it's too late. The guru has them in their sights. He's like, you, wait. No, go down. Breathe, make noise. Breathe. Sound breathing is there. Ekam inhale. Ekam inhale, hands up. Look up. Dui exhale, go down. This is how I watched Pattabhi Jois teach people that he had never seen or met before many, many times. There was no prerequisites. He didn't say, can you do Padmasana? Can you do headstand? Who is your teacher? How long have you been practicing? Are you vegetarian? What? No, he would just say, breathe, make noise.
Yeah.
Okay. And that actually there was one other prerequisite. He would say, you bring money? And if you didn't bring money, say, you go to bank, no problem, and you'll come back, and then you practice. But anybody that showed up was willing to do the practice. He would teach them right there. Inhale, hands up. So I was like, okay, if this man, this beautiful old man from India with very little English, will teach anybody, okay, with limited words, then I can use what I've learned from him and understand the system and do the same thing.
Because it can be pretty daunting for a beginner, can't it?
It can be,
look at the Ashtanga practice.
But that's what it comes to if they look at the Ashtanga practice. So if I hold up a poster of the primary series, say, here it is, this is what we're going to do today, it's like scary. But if I fold the poster in half and I say, okay, this is what we're going to do this day. This is called sun salutation, Surya Namaskara. That's all that exists, okay? This is your breath. Breathe like this. This is your bandhas. We're going to do vinyasa. It's a combination of breath and movement. It starts with these movements. Inhale, hands up, look up. Just like Pattabhi Jois did. Exhale, go down, head down. Inhale, look up. Exhale, walk back, lower yourself down like a push-up. Breathe right down. Exact. Simple, simple, simple. So do it again, and again, and again. And then we just watch 3 things. We watch the body, we watch the breath, and we watch the mind. And if all 3 of those things are absorbing the information, it's ready for more.
We're making
if
progress.
one of those things are suffering, like That's enough for today. If the mind's like, what, this foot, this hand, whatever, that's enough for today. If the body's like, I can't move like this, that's enough for today. And then repetition, the mother of perfection. And then even if that's all they do for many, many days, weeks, they're doing Ashtanga in my mind. So often as teachers, you know, we can think, no, we have to teach them all primary series, we have to teach them up to Navasana or whatever, and people like say, I'm out of here. This is going to break me, you know. It's too much for my body, too much for my mind, too much for my breath, too much for my schedule, I've got to go. So if we simplify it, then they can do what they can do, and then over time they grow if and when they're ready. So, you know, there's many Ashtanga books out there that are great, and on one level I can say there's no need for me to put out another Ashtanga book.
Yeah, so what makes it different? Is
well,
it geared towards a beginner?
It's geared towards the beginner in the way that it really is geared towards the beginner. One of the things, a lot of books like to say, yes, a beginner can use this book, but it has all of primary. What beginner needs to be doing all of primary? No beginner. Not even a beginner who is a dancer or an athlete or a gymnast that's super flexible and strong and even in their breath, because those three parts, the breath, the body, and the mind, all three of those will never be able to do it right away. It takes time, it takes repetition for all the things that really need to happen in the practice to happen. So when you give the whole possibility to somebody, whether it's a poster or a book or a DVD, they're going to do the whole possibility. It's really hard for them to say, okay, I'm going to just stop here. I'm not going to look into what's exactly. So the Ashtanga Made Simple book only teaches up to Paschimottanasana and then in a British finishing sequence, e basta.
And is it designed for them to be able to do it in conjunction with the teacher, or
absolutely
or on their own,
no? It would be recommended to be used with the teacher
as well.
But you know, it's going to be ideal for people that can't get to a teacher all the time, and of course ideal for people that can't get to a teacher at all. You know, Ashtanga has grown so much in so many places around the world, but it's also, there's many places that I meet people that's like, yes, I come from this strange place and there's no teacher. I have to travel 3 hours for a teacher or whatever. So they only get to practice with the teacher when they go to retreats or they go to trainings or they go somewhere for a weekend. So I think it's important, you know, these things like these apps and these DVDs and these books and all the stuff on YouTube, it's changing the yoga experience for many people around the world.
I met a girl that was practicing all second, and she'd only ever learned it from David Swenson's DVDs. And she had a really nice practice. And it was like, that's amazing to be able to have that dedication to follow through something. And yeah, like you said, she lived in a place where there was nothing available. And so it's, you can do it.
Common.
Cool.
This is very common.
I think that's all we got time for.
Okay.
Thanks, Michael, for talking to us. That was really cool.
Thanks,
man.
Bye.
Good.
See, I told you I can keep going and going and going.
You can talk as much as I can. It's disgraceful.